Maryland is a nonprofit that has been around for 25 years, and we are grounded in helping individuals enroll and apply for health insurance benefits, navigating the healthcare system, and addressing social determinants of health. The variety of the populations that we serve runs the gamut from cradle to career and beyond. We support foster care children, pregnant and postpartum women, all Medicaid recipients, and most recently, in 2019, have started to embed ourselves in the prison system across the state to support individuals reentering back into the community with health insurance. I want to thank our sponsors today, TriBridge Partners and Window Nation, for allowing this to be free to you today. So just a couple housekeeping. We are muted for the conversation. Please stay muted. Please add any questions you have and to join the discussion in the chat. I will get to those as we go through our run of show of questions that we have for Ivan Bates. However, I do want to just remind everyone that Ivan will not be speaking on specific cases from an ethical perspective. So please, if you ask any specific questions in the chat, they will not be addressed to him. So I am super excited to have colleague and friend. Ivan and I have known each other for a really, really long time. So I am going to give you a little introduction and background. If you don't know, Ivan Bates is a renowned trial attorney and respected community advocate with more than 25 years of experience as both a prosecutor and defense attorney. After serving the United States Army and earning degrees from Howard and William and Mary Law School, Ivan's first position after passing the bar exam in 1995 was as Assistant State's Attorney, or an ASA, in the Baltimore City State's Attorney's Office. Ivan, that's probably when we first met.
Yes, it is.
Ivan was a successful prosecutor who litigated numerous complex cases, and his talent led him to serving as an ASA in the Homicide Division, where he began advocating for families victimized by violent crimes. After his successful service as a prosecutor, he worked for one of Maryland's premier criminal defense firms, where he sharpened his trial skills and advocated for justice for all individuals brought before the criminal justice system. In 2006, Ivan started Bates and Garcia and became one of the most sought-after attorneys in the country. He's regarded as a thought leader on the criminal justice system and is often called on by local and national media to share his knowledge and expert opinion on legal matters. Among many high-profile cases, Ivan Bates' advocacy for the victims of the notorious Gun Trace Task Force helped lead to the federal indictments filed against the officers who betrayed their sacred duty to the residents of Baltimore. A dedicated community advocate and champion for equitable access to healthcare, Ivan previously served on the HCAM Board of Directors, which I'm honored to say. On July 19, 2022, Ivan won the three-way Democratic primary election for Baltimore City State's Attorney, defeating the two-term incumbent, and his four-year term will begin when he is sworn in on January 2nd, 2023. So please welcome Ivan Bates, the Baltimore City State's Attorney-elect. Thank you for joining us today, Ivan.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be here. One of my first actual live discussions since last night, where it was determined that I would be the state's attorney-elect. As you say, we've known each other a long time. Your father was the deputy state's attorney, who taught me a lot and helped mentor me for many, many years. And I remember, meeting you and spending time with him, and just, the way the state's attorney's office operated and the way that was able to service the community has always been something I remember. So I'm really glad to be here.
Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, so I've always it's interesting how our paths continue to cross, right? So in your experience with my father in the state's attorney's office, joining the HCAM board, actually prior to me being CEO, and now here today. So I'm curious, and we'll just start our conversation in January as you step up in the role of Baltimore City State's Attorney. What personally drew you to seek election for this position?
It was a couple things. I ran 4 years ago unsuccessfully. And back then, I was really focused on what was going on in the office, having been an alum of the office. There were a number of things I didn't like and things I wanted to change. And I was unsuccessful. Then I really kind of just focused on my practice, building my practice, growing my practice. But as you may know, I have a 6-year-old daughter. And one of the things that people don't know is when I was a young prosecutor, I had a murder case. One of the murder cases involved a young man chasing another man in a playground, a park over in Cherry Hill. He shot and killed him in front of everybody in the playground. And that was one of the cases that kind of always stuck with me. It was in the back of my mind until I had my own child. And then I'm at those playgrounds playing. I'm always looking over my shoulder and thinking about that. Then you see the gun violence, and then you see what's going on. I almost felt it was almost like a lawlessness going on. And then I just got to a point where, with my daughter, I was going to have to make a decision. Do I want to move out the city, or do I want to do something and try to be part of the solution? And so for me, it's about being a part of the solution. I want to make sure I provided a better environment for not only my child, but the other children. But also, I always had a warm place in my heart for the older adult population. I was doing more work, interacting more with the older adult population. I just figured, all the things that I've had the opportunity to do, let me try it one more time. And, take it from a different angle, the things I've learned, and really go out there and campaign and speak my truth. And I've been very blessed.
Yes, congratulations on your win and coming back after 4 years of not being successful and learning from that. But can you share what is the role of the city state's attorney from your view, and how will you approach your role?
Yes. It's important for people to know that I'm going to be the chief law enforcement officer. So what does that mean? That means that there will be an office in the office of individuals who work with me, that we look at the law. We understand why the police may have charged an individual, and we decide whether to go forward on those charges. If we go forward on those charges, then we try to understand what we feel is justice to get the victims and the victims' family the justice that they deserve. It could be various levels. It could be simply a dismissal and a warning. It could be a dismissal and diversion. It could be an actual plea agreement for what's called a probation before judgment. It could be, a suspended sentence where the court says we'll sentence you to jail, but we'll suspend a portion. Or it could be a request for a short period of jail or a lengthy period of jail. It depends. We interpret the laws and the rules, and based on that, we then make a recommendation to the court after they've either pled guilty or they've been found guilty in trial of what to do with an individual to hold them accountable for their actions.
Thank you for
Well
that.
done, Ames.
Whoops. Just a reminder to everybody to stay muted. We appreciate that. So as this speaker series is really focused on health, and health has a variety of different lenses. So from your perspective, what makes a community healthy, and what does a healthy city of Baltimore and even Maryland look like to you?
I think one of the things that's important when you talk about health, of course, you want to talk about oftentimes the physical health, the mental health, spiritual health. All those things are important. And so what do I think of? First of all, I look at the city. Is it a healthy city? Is it a green city? Everybody's just moving around, doing their own thing in their own silo. Are people being supportive of one another? So those are some of the things that you kind of look at from that standpoint. But from the criminal justice standpoint, a number of things you look at. Does an individual have mental health, and what are the mental health issues or concerns that we need to be concerned about? Are they, quote unquote, not criminally responsible because of their mental health, or is there something going on with their mental health during the actual act? Or is it an individual who just knows the difference between right and wrong, as the law talks about, and they're just making those decisions? Are they growing up in an environment with poverty? Are they doing specific actions or crimes because it's something in reference to poverty, their level, what's going on? And those are types of things that when I think about within the criminal justice system, you look at, you think about. Now, just because a person may be living below the poverty line doesn't mean that they have the opportunity or should be allowed the benefit to commit crimes. But those are things that we would look at and think about. Now, there's a difference between a person who's just going into the store and stealing deodorant or stealing food or things like that, as opposed to an individual that goes into a bank with a gun and robs it. Two totally different, both of them, quote unquote, thefts. One's the use of force with a weapon, and the other may be shoplifting, so to speak. You may find out the shoplifter may have mental health issues, or may, i.e., they're trying to just basically survive. We'll look at that, still hold that individual accountable, but try to direct that person to the programs they need to go to. But the person robbing a bank with a handgun, they could possibly also have some mental health issues, but we're going to have to hold them accountable in a different light, in a different way. So that some of the mental health services they may need, they may have to receive those services while they're incarcerated, paying their debt to society. And if they're not criminally responsible because of mental health issues, that's the job of their lawyer, the defense attorney, to make those arguments and for the court to look and evaluate them. So from my standpoint, making sure that the individual, quote unquote, the defendant is healthy, but also protecting the citizens of Baltimore City so that they can be healthy, so that if they want to walk, that they don't have to worry about crime in their neighborhood, so they can go out and they can enjoy the safe green spaces. So, we're looking to make sure we do the right thing within the system, but we're also making sure if we do our job, citizens will feel that this is a safer city, a healthier city, and they can enjoy the city to get their mental health as well as their physical health.
Thanks, Ivan. I know that accountability was a big platform for you in your campaign.
Yes.
According to the Stepping Up Initiative, a nationwide initiative, approximately 2 million times this year, individuals with mental health conditions will be admitted to jail. Now, you definitely just spoke to the challenges with that. And 75% of those people have a substance use disorder. So definitely what we're seeing is individuals that have co-occurring disorders. What programs currently being implemented in Baltimore do you identify in Baltimore to identify behavioral health issues and divert those individuals to care and treatment? And how do you see yourself expanding upon existing work to ensure individuals receive the behavioral health services they need? You spoke a little bit about it, about getting it in the facility, but can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, some of what I've been able to do since I was declared the victor in the Democratic primary is go around and talk to individuals, talk to the service providers, understand what programs they have. And one of the things that I'm beginning to understand more and more is that a lot of individuals who are service providers, they work in their own silo. So, it's not my job per se as a state's attorney to find those services for individual. However, one of the things I can do is be a partner for the individuals that are already doing that work. One of the things that I'm finding out is that they plan to have a therapeutic center over there where they demolished the local jail. And that is a perfect place where you have the state is the one pushing the facility to have the services and the resources for individuals that come in. You can have individuals who are, say, an individual is caught with drugs on their person. Instead of the police officer doing a straight arrest, they can take them to that facility so that they can go ahead and enter a drug treatment program. They can go ahead and enter the mental health programs right there without necessarily being involved in the criminal justice system. And so we can be a partner to say that's something we work with, something that we agree with, and something that we support. Now, in terms of my role as a state's attorney, my role, I personally feel, is to make sure we support, not necessarily the number one advocates per se, but we also have a duty to say, maybe this individual's having some mental health episodes. And so say there's no attorney there and they're there pro se, and the prosecutor sees that, the prosecutor does have a duty to bring that to the court and let the judge make the determination if this is an individual that should be, should they now have the opportunity to be looked at by a health professional to find out what's going on with them. Of course, you have the AA programs. You have so many other individuals that are doing the positive work within the community, whether it's Right Turn, Gardenzia, just to name a few. In terms of substance abuse, you have individuals that are in jail that file documents and requests to enter inpatient drug treatment programs. So I'm a big believer of those programs. I'm a very big believer of making sure people receive the mental health support, but I also see, to me, that help is on the way on a whole nother level. One of the things I talked about is community court, having a location to direct individuals who are sometimes charged with low-level offenses into these facilities. I've spoken to the GBC as well as other business organizations to say, how can we partner? How can we help? I plan to go up to New York to look at this location called the Community Center that deals with community courts. And the community courts model basically are the low-level offenses. So you have drug treatment programs. You could have someone there who comes once, twice a week from the MVA to help individuals receive their licenses. If they don't have the license, we recognize sometime coming back from incarceration is trying to help them get the licenses. We'll have individuals that are there to do mental health screening. All of those locations. One of the things I also would like to have in the future is we have to deal with sex workers. What do we do with sex workers? And for me, I'm not as focused on the sex workers. I'm really focused on the sex trafficking model to make sure that we go after the sex traffickers. And so, what does that look like? Does that look like we're just going to have the police arrest? No. Does that look like the police engage? Hopefully, then take the sex worker to a safe place. Hopefully, have a sex advocate there to be someone that they can lean on, and then hopefully having the opportunity to find out, are they being sex trafficked and what's going on? Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think sometimes we can reimagine the way in which we do the interactions with individuals to help them get the support that they really need.
It's great that you're looking at other models across the country. University of Baltimore, University of Maryland School of Law funded a project with many other funders several years ago, where they had prostitution court, where first offenders of a prostitution being charged with prostitution were met with a social worker and were diverted to supportive services as opposed to being incarcerated. And so it would be great to actually see that back up and working. It was at the Cherry Hill, the Cherry Hill court. And we had a social worker there, and HCAM was helping get individuals access to health insurance and helping them navigate the healthcare system. So of course, HCAM would love to be a part of any community courts for low-level offenders, definitely.
Oh, without a doubt. One of the things they also talk about is deflection. And so deflection is something they talk about. There's a program down in San Antonio that really has this therapeutic model set out, and they talk about deflection. So individuals are brought into the therapeutic center, but they're not even necessarily then brought into the criminal justice system, but we look to see what services are available, what services they need based on the low-level offenses. And so, they still, the prosecutors still would look to see, hey, does this individual qualify? And instead of giving them a court date or something like that, we can automatically have the services and resources right here that this individual would need. And so that's why I think it's about taking the time to reimagine the way we do things. I think, we've gone too far in mass incarceration, but I also feel we've gone too far in the other direction where we say we're not going to do anything. I think we have to find that sweet spot in the middle to hold people accountable, but there are different levels, and jail doesn't always have to be that model. Now, violent crime, yes, without a doubt. But for the low-level offenses, I don't think people want them to go to jail. I think a lot of times people want them to get the help and support that they need.
Absolutely. And we talked a little bit about it in the introduction around how important it is for you to support the victims and witnesses to crime, how they've experienced trauma. Our city has been dealing with trauma for many years and damaging effects to their mental health and well-being. So how do you think, under your leadership, the state's attorney's office can advocate to protect victims' right and ensure they have access to care?
Yeah. One of the first things I think we have to do, if you really want to change the narrative in the city about crime, is that you really have to have victims and witnesses. You have to get them, make sure they know they're going to be safe. Mm-hmm. You have to get them the resources that they need. And those resources sometimes may just be, maybe we've had to move them. Maybe we give them, a stipend because they need a bus pass to get back and forth, something in some way. And so I think those are things that are very important. So one of the things that I also did, since I had the opportunity to go, and I spoke with Governor Hogan about the money that was originally allocated to the state's attorney's office that has not been given yet. And it's for victims and witnesses. And so having that money, and it was a great conversation. I do believe I should be able to get that money. But having that money allows us to give the wraparound service to the victims and to the witnesses, giving them a safe place and a safe space Once we're able to do that, then we are able to have the dialogue to, make these individuals feel safer so that they can come to court. It may just be something as simple as they need a ride to the court from their house.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd have now the money to do that. We'd have the money to go out and find and have the investigators make sure that they transported them so that they could go ahead and not worry about bumping into the person they could be testifying against or their family members. We've moved them, and now we're in a place, in a position that we've moved them that they feel safe and feel comfortable testifying and doing the right thing in that regard.
So hopefully that money can be moved over quickly in the next 2 months before our new governor takes his seat. Although you have had conversations with the incoming governor, is that correct?
Yes. Oh, yes, we have. We have as well.
Good.
We've had very good conversations. One of the things that I think is important is that we're on the same page. And I think it's important that people know that it's just not myself and the incoming governor, but the incoming attorney general, also the current U.S. attorney, and even the mayor. We've all had these conversations to say that we have to find a way to work together. There's some things that are not my job.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's important for me to have a seat at the table so I can support the job of others so that the system and everything can work better for the citizens of Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. I know I've been years ago, gone off script a little here, but years ago, there used to be community advocates, community liaisons that were across the city that were connected to the different districts. And I don't know if that still happens in the state's attorney's office. Would you foresee bringing that back?
Well, they have been doing it. We definitely will. We'll still try to have that model because it's important that people in the community understand what's going on. One of the things that's also important to me is I think we need to have a division outreach for the Latino community. My understanding is that there's one individual who now is assigned an advocate to the Latino community, but that's one of the fastest growing communities in Baltimore City. And so we recognize, we look at the data, that a number, sometimes they disproportionately victims because of language barrier, because of potential immigration consequences. So we need to find and give them the wraparound resources, give them the resources so that they can basically, we can work with them. And so it's not just one lawyer, but we'd like to have an entire division so that we can go ahead and serve them effectively and efficiently.
That's exciting to hear. You talked a little bit about some models in New York and San Antonio, evidence-based models from other communities addressing health and social needs. And I know that's not your charge as the Baltimore City State's Attorney-elect, but can you talk about others that you are looking to replicate within Baltimore City?
Well, like I said, they're going to have this therapeutic center. I think it's very similar to what they've done down in San Antonio. There's also one down in Arizona as well. And those centers and locations, basically, it's almost one-stop shop to give the support necessary to individuals that have now been introduced to the criminal justice system, whether it's through an arrest or maybe even a citation or somehow. But you have to have a location. And so I do think that in time we can hopefully get a location. I know that they're building and doing things like that right now in terms of the building where the old jail was, and having that location is the first step because you have that anchor institution, so to speak. The next thing is making sure that these individuals that will come through the system, that they have all the wraparound services to take them out of their conditions. And then from there, that they also have the services that they need and the support to now have fully changed their life. And so being a part of that is very exciting because we now are able to have the resources under one roof. And I'm really excited about that. And, we a lot of people doing great work throughout the city, but they're in their own silo, and being able to bring some of these people from their silo to the group silo, I think will work really well.
So we have a couple questions in the chat. I'll give a pause to my questions. So beyond prosecutorial discretion and referrals to health services in specific cases, is there any broad messaging that the city state's attorney's office can put forward to Baltimore Police Department and City Hall to encourage them to address social determinants of health in a more comprehensive way? Let me know if you need me to repeat that.
Well, I think one of the things we can do is we have to educate ourselves to have the true training, and that's very important because the training allows us, all in the system to understand what to look for, and what are those factors, so that when the police see they are treating the individual potential suspect or potential defendant in a manner, in a way that they will have those wraparound services, and it's not just a quick arrest and forget about you, but recognize, okay, this person has some mental health concerns, and how can we put them and steer them in the right direction, i.e., with the mental health concerns. And I'm saying this from, say, hypothetically, you're talking about a person who may be, loitering or trespassing, those low-level offenses. Now, when you get to the more violent offenses, we have to deal with them differently.
I know one of your campaign conversations that you had often was about training and the hiring and placement of attorneys within the state's attorney's office, that there's a huge vacancy there. Can you speak a little bit to your plan on how to recruit and retain, maybe pull some old state's attorney individuals back into Baltimore City?
Yeah. From what we can tell, what we've seen is that there have been a number of vacancies, and one of the biggest things we have to do is let people know that this is a great work environment. We have to work and change the culture, and show that the prosecutors have the support. So one of the things with prosecutors is oftentimes you're not a prosecutor because of the money. You're a prosecutor because of love, the service for the city.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you just totally monopolize every single second of their time. For instance, we want prosecutors to get back to being prosecutors, meaning they're in court, they're focused on that. For right now, we look at technology, something as simple as the body camera. The body camera basically records a lot of information, and prosecutors can use that information to go head on and secure convictions. So what does that mean? Now you have the body camera, and say they want to transcribe it. There's the software to do that transcription, just press a button, isn't there. So we need to go ahead and find a way to purchase that software so then that prosecutor can have the transcription by just pressing a button, and then be able to use that to secure the conviction. And so those are types of things I think that are very important and are going to be very needed for that office.
Yeah, increasing the use of technology is really important. And we're seeing innovations all the time. And that seems like a really important one, as opposed to listening to hours and hours of body camera footage and transcribing that.
Exactly, because now that prosecutor could spend 2 or 3 days transcribing, just focusing on that aspect, instead of just taking the transcript and figuring out how to prepare that case for trial.
Absolutely. And anything you're going to do as it relates to training new prosecutors coming into the state's attorney's office?
Yeah. One of the things I always tell people, I said, look, we're going to look at the Baltimore Orioles model. We're going to have young prosecutors, and we're going to get them in, and we're going to take the time to really, really train them. We want to have older veteran alum prosecutors come back, sit, talk with these prosecutors. For instance, I've spoken to former retired prosecutors who want to come in and sit with prosecutors, small groups of them, to help them to look over their cases. It's a very, very young office. And sometimes, as your father would always say to me, prosecutors just don't know what they don't know. And, if you haven't had that opportunity to be in that situation, then you don't know what you don't know. But it's incumbent upon me to know for them, to put them in a situation. So you have a former prosecutor who comes in and volunteers their time to sit with these prosecutors as they prepare their cases, to sit with them as they're doing their trials, to sit with them as they write motions or briefs, to help them through that process. And so that's one of the things that's really big for me. It's just not bringing an outside individual in to train, but it's former prosecutors who understand what it's like, having been there before, and who are retired. And so you can be retired and say, you know what, I'll give 10 hours a week, and volunteer that time period for these young prosecutors, because oftentimes you're now reliving that case with them. You're thinking about your time in the courtroom, and now you're helping a young prosecutor. We've reached out to a number of alums, and they're really excited about that opportunity.
Sounds like a mentorship program in its infancy that is going to be created. And be careful, you have an alum of the state's attorney's office listening, so you might have to recruit him for a couple hours of mentorship.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt.
There's another question in the chat, and this actually has been an old issue that has rebubbled. There was a referendum regarding the law with marijuana offenses. So how will the state's attorney's office respond with those who are incarcerated for marijuana offenses? It's kind of a broad question, but will they be exonerated, or will their cases be scrutinized? That's the question. So I think every individual case is different. Of course, we understand that. But if there is a platform for you related to marijuana cases.
Yeah, well, it's the difference between simple possession of marijuana and possession of intent to distribute. I think it's important to understand what the law is and what the law says. And what the law pretty much says is that you're over 21 or above, that you can possess a certain amount of marijuana, a small amount of marijuana. And that's really important. So some of the individuals that are in jail still for marijuana, that was because they possessed more than a small amount. And so those individuals, not but so much you can do, because it's still drug distribution, of which you can't have. And the law hasn't hasn't said that, you can have a large amount of marijuana. So, but individuals who have previously been found guilty of marijuana possession, yeah, without a doubt, those are types of cases you'd want to go ahead and expunge, because it's simple possession. It's a big difference between possession of intent to distribute and simple possession.
Thank you. And just a reminder for those on our discussion today, we're not going to be speaking specifically about specific cases. There was a question in the chat regarding a recent case. And so we're not going to put Ivan Bates in that position from an ethical position. Remember, he is the Baltimore City State's Attorney elect as of January 2nd. I hope I have the honor to see him being sworn in as a state's attorney.
Yes.
Individuals who are transitioning from incarceration to life in the community. And so HCAM does a lot of work with those individuals, whether it's health insurance or addressing social determinants of health, face a lot of barriers in accessing health and supportive social services. And you talked about the therapeutic community. Do you have any other sort of ideas or concepts around how the state's attorney's office might be able to provide help to returning citizens to successfully reintegrate and reduce recidivism?
Well, I think one of the things is that, remember, we're in a job of holding people accountable. So when they come home, that's not necessarily what we do. But I do think it's important that we understand what services the individuals need to make sure they receive that support. It can be something as soon as before they go in prison, that we ask the court to give, whether it's drug treatment and all those other types of issues and wraparound services, asking for them in the front end. And then in the back end, that's where they are. But we're also there sometime to say, okay, you're focused on maybe some of your sobriety, but you want to do a facility that's out the state. We're there to say, okay, Judge, we're not going to stand in the way of that. It's interesting because when you're coming home from prison, I think it's difficult sometimes to make that change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's incumbent upon the state's attorney's office to not necessarily be the one driving it, but be the one who's trying to support that as well. And that can come a number of different ways. Sometimes it's, helping, sometimes an individual may not have a job, and therefore it looks like they're violating their probation. So from my standpoint, why do we want to necessarily, or what are we doing here to have a better understanding of what's going on? I think it's important to be very flexible with individuals when they're returning home to understand what's going on. It's very difficult. The transition can be very difficult. Now, it's a difference between individuals now is charged with a crime, such as, say, an armed robbery or very bad physical assault or something like that. Those individuals we have to deal with differently. But another individual that, let's say, God forbid, they're returning home and they can't fulfill the ability to get a job.
Mhm.
Well, we have to be, that technically they can violate the probation. That's something we have to, I think, work very hard to make sure that we try to support that individual, because it's one thing if you're looking for a job and you can't find it because your record. So now we're going to penalize this person again. That's not good. However, I think seeing an individual who wants to try to change their life, get better, those are types of individuals we really need to try to support as well.
Absolutely. I think there's so many workforce development initiatives going on in the community that just actually acknowledging them and making sure that parole and probation officers are aware of those workforce development initiatives, as well as the prosecutors, just so if they have to, can make sure that that's available to the individual reentering the community.
Yeah, I agree.
We did have another question in the chat from Sheila Cast, who wanted us to go back to the marijuana question. And what advice would you give to legislators who are about to write the new rules?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to be very deliberate in the new rules. It's 21 and below. It's still against the law, point blank. I think they have to make sure that that's known. But I also think that we have to figure out how you're going to deal with the car stops with marijuana. The court will eventually get it, but I think the legislature needs to keep an eye out on that. But also, the amount of marijuana that a person can have is very finite. I think it's 1.5 grams to 2.5 grams, and then above 2.5 grams to some other amount. It could be a citation and different things. So I think we have to do it in a way that's going to be uh, easy for people to digest. But I think, one of the things I think is very important is, the drug treatment aspect, because I'm always concerned, here's a drug that is now going to be legalized. And it's always, as anything, even alcohol, we also have to look at the potential for abuse and understanding also individuals who are driving under the influence of drugs. And I think those things are very important for the legislature to think about, how they articulate it, so that a member of the legislature will understand some of the things that they need to get right in the bill. And I really would like to have the direction from the courts and the legislature of how to deal with the car stops, because technically the police say stop a car, and the driver of the car, let's say, looks like or say the driver gets a license and it's 18, but the officer has a strong smell of marijuana. At that moment in time, because that person's 18, under 21, and that person has a smell of marijuana, then is that now leading to probable cause for the officer to go ahead and say, oh, there's another crime afoot, so I want to either detain you, or I'm going to ask to go ahead and search your vehicle, or something like that? How do we deal with those situations? I would, ask the legislature to, in the back of their mind, kind of think about those things, because that would be very important for us.
Absolutely. You talked a little bit about your conversations with GBC, Greater Baltimore Committee, and which has new leadership. We're super excited to see the new leadership on board. And so can you talk a little bit about the role that the business community can play with your office and to create safe and healthy communities?
Well, look, it's not just my office, but I think more the business community has an important, huge role just in general. And I think the role has to be one in which, it shows that level of support, especially such as something within, let's just say, the squeegee workers. They have that support with the squeegee workers to help provide those resources, to help provide the job training and help provide those jobs. I think for returning citizens, the business community is huge because they can help provide those jobs. They can take the stigma away from the returning citizen. They can make sure that they provide not just the jobs, but a real job that pays a living wage, and the training to do those types of things, the apprenticeship programs. And also, I think the business community and the whole city as a whole needs to look and address sometimes the transportation issues that led to some of the poverty that we see in the city. So the business community is a humongous partner for Baltimore City. And I think if we can have that relationship and understand what that relationship can look like in the future. I think it allows individuals who are returning and individuals who may have, just had some small brushes with the law to still have a job and to get a job that allows them to have a real living wage.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think as we continue to work with individuals that are coming back into the community and dealing with not only chronic health conditions, but we're also addressing those very tangible items of being able to get transportation to and from work, and really keep them back out of the facility and help them be successful back into the community.
I apologize. I really do. This is an emergency call. I apologize.
That's
Give me
okay.
2 seconds.
Yeah. So we're going to give Ivan 2 seconds for his emergency phone call. It happens in our real world of being parents and caregivers. While we are waiting, I do want to let you know that we will be sending out an evaluation and feedback. So to make sure that you complete our survey that'll be put in the chat regarding our conversation today. I want to thank Ivan for joining us. Hopefully he'll be back shortly and it's not serious, as well as our sponsors, Window Nation and TriBridge Partners, for their participation today. You okay, Ivan?
Yeah, I apologize. I had a little issue with my daughter.
That's
So
okay. And that's my comment was life happens. And I know she wasn't feeling well earlier, and we want to make sure that she's safe. And but that's all right. We got a shout out back to our sponsors again, Window Nation and TriBridge Partners. So as we are transitioning off of in the last 15 minutes, we have a really good question in the chat. Would your state's attorney's office consider inviting middle and high school students to have quarterly Q&A sessions, get a feel that they too aspire to do good work and be successful?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to reach out to the students. I think it's important for the state's attorney to go into the schools to explain the law. The law is extremely confusing. One of the things, I think people don't understand their rights all the time. Like I always, whether I'm the state's attorney or whether I'm a defense attorney, the first thing I think is important for everybody is to understand the police come, ask for a lawyer. Because if you don't ask for a lawyer, they're going to elicit a statement. And that statement, as a state's attorney, the prosecutors were going to use against you to convict you of the crime. And so that's very, very important to understand the rights. And it's also very important for individuals to understand the way the criminal justice system works and understanding how some of the actions that you make as a juvenile, how they can impact you later as an adult. For instance, I do a lot of federal work on the defense side. So I've seen individuals that I think they have no record except a juvenile record. And then over on the federal side, they have guidelines. Before they know it, the juvenile conviction they had at 16 years old for carrying a handgun, now the guidelines are enhancing them to give them more time because of something they did at 16. So just because you're a juvenile, do not think that that record technically is sealed and doesn't follow you. That's a myth and a misconception. Now, for purpose of job and employment, yes. But then what about for purpose of the individual that now is, say, you're 16 years old, you're carrying a gun, you pled guilty to a gun, it's 4 people in a car, you're the juvenile, didn't have a record, you pled guilty. And now all of a sudden you're hanging out with your same friends in your neighborhood and they're selling drugs and you're hanging out around the drug shop and you're not doing anything. Then the federal government does a RICO and then all of a sudden they arrest you and everybody else. So now you could potentially be enhanced because they have other guns in the RICO. So there are a lot of things that happen with the law that young kids, juveniles, just don't understand. And of course, when you're young, you think you're invincible. So yes, I would definitely welcome that, to explain the law to as many young people as possible so that they don't make the mistakes and they truly understand what their future can be for them.
Now, Ivan, we know you have a big job ahead, and we recognize that not all of these items are going to be addressed in the first 90 days of your service. And we also recognize that many of these things are based from systemic racism and are grounded in our city. And we know that from our discussion today that you are going to have some work to do. So can you talk a little bit about maybe just one or two of your takeaways from today's conversation? We did record it for other people to listen to, but some takeaways that you want the community to know.
I want the community to recognize that, my job is the chief law enforcement officer to hold people accountable. And that, I'm not a social worker, but I understand the need for social workers and partner with social workers and have a better understanding. That I recognize the criminal justice system isn't one size fits all, that people come in it not necessarily wanting to be a part of it, but sometimes whether their status, their circumstance, something has led them there. That I recognize that it's a terrible situation to be in, but I also recognize that my job is to protect the citizens. Now, you may have mental health issues, and we'll try to deal with those mental health issues, but I also have to look at the crime itself. And we may not always agree, but I always understand my heart is in the right place to do the right thing to protect the citizens. But I also recognize also sometimes protecting that individual sometimes from themselves. I'm real big about expungement. I'm real big about holding people accountable at the very beginning. And if you can show me that you've changed and we can work very hard, then I believe what we can do to try to expunge some of these convictions is very important because it gives people the lease on life. The same person, individual were at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 is not the same individual they were at 33, 34. I see individuals that had a felony drug conviction, or let's say they had a handgun at 18 and now at 45 years of age and would do anything to get that handgun off their record because now let's say they're an electrician and it's stopping them from getting a security clearance to make $40 or $50 an hour, so they're stuck at $25 an hour. I understand what those convictions do to the long-term viability of people's lives, and I take that very seriously. But I still also recognize my number one job is to protect the citizens of Baltimore City.
Thank you, Ivan. There was a question that just popped up in the chat related to criteria for expungements related to felonies. I don't think that falls under your jurisdiction, though, does it?
Well, it doesn't, but it's something I think is very important. I'd love to try to partner with whether it's the public defender's office or other institutions to try to look at that. I think it's very important. The felonies you're looking at, for instance, if you have a felony drug conviction, I believe it is 15 years. That's important to have it expunged. But also one of the things, even though you can have it expunged on the state side, on the federal side, they still would look at it, to show that it's still there. Now, 15 years or longer, it doesn't come to be used against you, but it's something they still will see. But I do believe that depending on the felony, we can definitely look at that. But right now, yes, it's already there for felony drug distribution.
Thanks, Ivan. I want to thank you as a longtime friend and colleague, HCAM board member, for spending your time today. I know you are super busy, and just even trying to get 5 minutes of a phone call is really challenging as you prepare and plan your strategy for the state's attorney's office. I wish you so much luck. I am so proud of you. I really have to say that. And I look forward to seeing you sworn in January. I want to thank you again for joining us today, our sponsors for today's conversation, Window Nation and Tribridge Partners. And thank you all for joining and your insightful questions.
Well, I want to thank you for having me, thinking about me, and please keep me in your thoughts and prayers. I'm going to do the best I can for the citizens and give 100% every day.
We know you will. We know you will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care.
Please make sure that in the chat is, or Jordan will be sending it out. I don't know if it's in the chat or she'll be sent. Oh, there it is. The survey Caitlin posted for your feedback for planning for future events. We'll have 2 more in the spring. And if you were moved by our conversation, feel free to go to our website,